once I actually did an interview with a music label distributor from India, and that is on behalf of Spotify. And in that call, the Spotify account manager was there, so I'll sit in because they have very good relationship. And at the end of the conversations, and this lady from India was talking to the account manager. So Ashni, not the real name, don't worry. You seem to gain a lot of weight since we last saw you. So bear in mind, this actually being recorded and live streamed. In the back room, we have product manager, designer, and so on, and from New York, Stockholm, and London. Everyone was kind of quite awkward. And also little did that lady knows, actually, Ashni has miscarriage, so she still haven't lost her weight. And that reminded me of another experience I have many years ago when I was in Shanghai with my American clients. And after the work, and we kind of walk around in the mall, and we went into a boutique shops and look around and about to leave. And the saleswoman came over and said, "Oh yeah, hang on, I can find something nice for you to hide your arm." So not to me, but to my client. And that kind of implies her arms is big and needs to be hidden. So we're awkward and we say, it's okay, thank you, and we walk away. I know that actually the saleswoman actually have a very good intentions, and it's just being nice that we can find something nice for you, and there's no bad intentions on that. And also I know the lady from India actually is fine because she's just talking, she's just having a nice chat, it's like conversations. In Asia, a lot of you probably know that it's quite common to talk about like weight and how you look and things like that. But that's just a small examples of how cultural differences could actually, how different culture have different way of interact and communications and so on. So this is what I have been doing with helping businesses and companies in kind of help them to navigate the cultural nuances and also to help them to have a better understanding of their market and customers in different culture and different background, and see actually what actually expecting and how they behave and expectation and so on, and how does that impact the business and also your products and services. Because a good user experience for Americans will be different from British, from Mexicans and Japanese and so on. So one thing like Phil was saying, culturalizations, I tend to use culturalizations, and although it's not in dictionary, but it's kind of like you understand what that is. I use that as opposed to localizations is because localizations, a lot of times when you talk about localizations, people always tend to think translations. We have localized our website, and what they meant is they have translated all their copy into that language, and that is enough. But actually, there are a lot more into that, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I want to start this talk by talking about David Attenborough's, Sir David Attenborough's Galapagos Island documentary. I think it was on Sky a few years ago, so if you want to have watched, it's actually very interesting. So Galapagos Island is actually situated on the equator of South America, and it's 500 miles from Ecuador, mainland Ecuador. And it was and still is a good place to study the evidence of evolutions by natural selections. So take Galapagos penguins as examples. So it was believed actually the closest relatives for Galapagos penguins is actually from Magellanic penguins. Somehow, many decades and centuries ago, like Magellanic penguins actually being carried by storms or currents to this island. Because of for some reason, this kind of cold weather animals and birds actually being able to survive in Galapagos Island because they adapted themselves. So instead of being bigger, they actually adapted themselves to be smaller, and then the genes start to change to kind of cope with the weather for being warmer, so they can lose the heat quicker. And also they have this hairless spot. They start to develop this hairless spot on the cheek again to heat and release heat. not only just physical changes, they also have these behavior changes where they tend to stand with the flipper open, so that again to lose the heat. So this is the same for human as well. Like we all actually evolve very differently based on our ancestor, like most likely where our ancestor with the climate, altitude, and also the resources they have. And it's not just on our gene, but also our behaviors and our attitude and needs. Hence, what we need actually change in the way of how we interact with the brands and what we need from brands and services on that. So a lot of time we hear people saying like, the West is, the East is kind of behind the West, or, this country is catching up on the other countries. And we make those kind of comparisons in educations, in technology, and so on. It sounds like human evolutions, isn't it? Like we all start from big apes, apes with big jaw, and then we kind of end up in modern man. But this is not evolutions. This is more like it. It's like human is living alongside with spider monkey and with chimpanzee. It's just we all evolve slightly differently based on the environment and so on. And we find our niche and kind of survive. And some species might grow and get bigger, and some species might die off along the way. So there's no right way or wrong way. It's just every culture, every country, and people around the world just evolve in a different ways. There's no right or wrong answer to that. So take M-Pesa an example. So I don't know how many of you kind of familiar with this. So it's a mobile payment, very, very successful in Kenya. It was successful not by luck or anything, just because it actually fit into the environment and context. So first of all, it was launched in 2007. And first of all, actually Kenya when they launched in 2007, actually more than 70% people are unbanked. So they don't have access to bank facilities, and they don't have bank accounts. But where they have actually very, very high mobile penetrations. I'm not talking about smartphone, but it could be kind of semi-smartphone, or actually the old style of Nike, Nokia as well. With that, actually one of their main dominant operator, so instead we have Orange and O2 and so on. Their main one is Safaricom, and Safaricom is the one actually behind M-Pesa. So having one dominant mobile carrier or operator actually make the adoptions faster for this service as well. And the other thing as well is Kenyans are actually very collectivist society, so social support is very important. When you talk to them on the ground, and it's very, very, very common to say, oh, I'm sending money and helping this person, that person. They are actually not their family. They could be their relatives, or they could be their friends and neighbors that they live close by. It's just the whole support is very important. So it's very common for people in rural area, they go and work and everything, they want to send money back to the, in urban area, they want to send money to rural area. So M-Pesa actually allows them to do that, to transfer money, withdraw money, receive money by just using the basic phone. And also this actually combat the corruptions as well, the small bribery, also the robbery as well. Corruptions and robbery, those two. So again, it's not by luck they actually got it right and they're kind of successful, but it just fit exactly to the unique needs of what Kenyans need and fit into their ecosystem as well. So unless you can replicate every single thing we talk about, every element into another countries, using the same technology and services and solutions, actually just as it is, very often it's not going to work. So you need to actually understand the niche and also understand the context and everything, having a holistic view about it in order to kind of provide a better solutions for them. So when we talk about culture differences and so on, you can find a lot of models out there. And one of the most common ones is this model. I was trying to pronounce this name as much as I can. It's Gert Hofstede. So this model. So they used to have five dimensions, and then they actually become 6. So you can see they have this power distance, individualism versus collectivism, and masculinity and femininity, and so on. So a lot of times, if you Google all this, and you can tend to see a lot of articles were talking about, oh, these models, and then because of this country have this height in this dimension, hence the website is being designed this way and that way. So this is one of the articles that I kind of pull out. So take one dimensions like Turkey and United States and individualism's rating. So this author actually used McDonald's example, and like it or not, actually McDonald's are quite good with their localizations and culturalizations on their products and services and so on. So this author was saying, oh yeah, because Turkeys have very high collectivism, because it's low in individualism. So they design in a way that they have social buttons, the visual of the cook, so you can connect to them, and they have reviews because it's social and so on. Whereas for US, they were talking about, because it's high individualism. So they actually have the cook, and then they kind of have a lot of call to action, just very focused on individualism. So once I actually done the workshop, I kind of like, okay, if this dimension is, like, let's use this dimension to design something. So I gave them the design of McDonald's on the UK website and say, actually, these are the dimensions compared to China. So you can see, actually, these are very high and these are very different on the rating as well. So design something. And then find it really, really hard, because what does that mean? How do you convert this individualism rating into a design so that it's different from the UK website? So they start to find it actually quite frustrating, because it can start to feel like sexist, or because when it comes to masculinity, like, what does that mean? It's more feminine. Like, how do I design a website, a color, or it could be racist as well, but mostly it's quite stereotyping. So another professor in this university as well was talking about, actually, culture sometimes it evolves as well, it could change. So if you kind of stay kind of static within the same model and dimension, not changing it and following the evolutions as well, that it actually not valid to a certain point. And there are a lot of other dimensions, like 7 dimensions, culture, and then so on. I'm not here to scrutinize these articles or these models, but it's just they are very, very useful to give you an understanding as a starting point, and also like reference as well. But just have to be very careful when you use it to apply into your products or design and so on. You just don't want to kind of take very stereotyping, because then it will very depending on subjective views of whoever actually creating the product based on this view. Just be careful, but it's good as a reference. So where do you even start on culturalizations? If you want to do culturalization, where do you start? So I kind of created this kind of high-level three-level frameworks on culturalizations. The first one is about respecting, establishing respect. So this is very important. It's the most basic. It's about showing your respect to your customers to form a very good relationship with them. So it could be, like, very importantly, not doing anything offensive that from the point of view of politics or culture or religions or any sort of that. Because if you get it wrong, you can get actually damage your brand quite easily. Not sure if you can guess, like, what is the similarities of this all these brands actually share. All of them at some point had to apologize to the Chinese government at some point, because they make a geopolitical errors or mistakes. They kind of they talk about Taiwan, Tibet, or Hong Kong as a country rather than a region, because they should be part of China. And so, for example, in McDonald's, they have ads where 2 seconds, you can only see on that 2 seconds that you have student cards which says which shows Taiwan as a country, and that actually had backlash. They have to cancel the whole ads for that, just 2 seconds. And then Marriott as well, they had this agency run a survey for them, and the agency actually accidentally put Tibet as a country, as a selections. They closed down their website for a week in China. So bear in mind, Chinese website is actually the most highest sales they get outside US. So that costs them a lot of money. So you have to be careful and be more sensitive in things that actually can damage your brands. Not just, sometimes it's just on your design on products and small things as well. Games, Call of Duty, you probably, many of you have played that. So if one of the scene, you have this scene where there's a picture frames of showing Islamic text saying Allah is beautiful and he loves beauty. So it's actually forbidden for Muslims to actually carry or utter all these texts and talk about Allah, especially in the toilet setting. So this actually upset, they didn't being banned, or they were not being banned or anything, but it upset a lot of Islamic gamers. So Activision, the publisher, have to quickly remove this scene and change it without further damage. Let's do a quick exercise as well. So I would like you to draw an icon in your head or on your paper. You're not going to show it anyone, don't worry. With kind of like an icon to represent cuisine in Asia with a bowl and chopstick. Just very quick one in your head. How would you draw it? Something like that, right? Quite simple, very straightforward. Can't go wrong anything. But actually, having chopstick kind of stick on the bowl, or whether you're straight or actually just put it in the bowl, actually means you're actually serving food to the deceased or people who actually passed away already. So you can see that in Japan in their funeral. And it was believed that actually in a lot of Asian culture, it actually brings bad luck, and you don't want to associate with that. So small things like that actually does matter. Bad news is that there's no complete guides. You can't find anywhere else that actually can have any reference or anything that tell you exactly everything that you need to do and don't do. Because even within a country, there are so many things that you can cover and everything. So how do you make sure you do it right? So the most important thing is that when you're creating content or materials like images or marketing content or anything that might touch anything a bit more sensitive to religions and politics and everything, just be more sensitive. Do some desk research. Or sometimes you even actually could talk to your local connections or friends about, oh, we are doing these things. Is there anything that actually show it to you that actually is a no-no? Because a lot of these mistakes can be easily picked up by anyone, the locals, rather than, you don't have to be expert on that. So just be careful and more sensitive. Don't make like stereotype assumptions and kind of look into it a bit more. So then the second level is cultural expectations. So this level feels really basic and like very easily not be paying attention to. So, but if you got it wrong, it could hinder your customer experience. So let me give you an example. So we're talking about translation, right? Like if I have a French version, I already cover France, Switzerland, and Canada, right? They are all speaking French. But then when you talk about it, look at it, it's like, okay, but their date format is actually different. So when you design it or when you're coding and everything, you have to kind of match to what they are familiar with. It could be actually the currencies and so on. So this is just a quick examples. There are so many other things that actually you have to think about, even though they speak the same language. So grouping countries and in terms of language, that is quite risky as well. What other things? Naming. So again, names, like how difficult it could be. So let's take the order. So I'm from Malaysia. I live here for 20 years. In the UK, I'm Chui Chui Tan. In Malaysia, I'm Tan Chui Chui, because that's how we have our name kind of order. So when you do the forms, you want to capture the right things, right? Because a lot of times users don't tend to read the label or so on. So you want to kind of get designed in a way that they are familiar with. So then you can capture the right data and then you can address them the correct way. Middle names, again, like not all countries have middle names. My first name is Chui Chui, although there's a space in between the two trees. But it's my first name, right? So, but in the UK, councils, Bristol Council, HMRC, banks, just always call me Chui and drives me crazy because that is not my name. They assume my second name, my second Chui is a middle name, so take it out. So it's all. So, but this is kind of I'm really frustrated when that happened. So there are a lot of different things like length. Some countries have longer names. You don't want to say okay, your box you can only type a certain, and then they can't start to read what they type in the past already, in the previous characters already. Spacing as well, and then special characters, dash or so on. Like I saw a lot of tweets before as well, like people saying that the forms will say, please fill in the real name. Like that is their real name. Like it's just they have a dash or something. So make sure your forms and everything can capture that. So then you have a lot of things like numbers, symbols, and then your currencies and the dates formats and so on. So every single thing of this, everything like small details actually could influence the experience as well. There's so many times you can see on Twitter of people booking holidays wrongly or train tickets wrongly because of the dates. Or Sunday in America, they start with Sunday, so the calendar always start with Sunday, and then ours we start on Monday. So small things like that. So a lot to think about. Hence, I actually created this global design guide that actually cover as much thing as possible. But again, you can't possibly cover everything. So with some countries, and you can look at that. So this is kind of things that you can find in the guides as well. Like I was talking about, for example, in India, actually, they use the separations, and they don't separate on the third digits, but they actually on the second digit. So it would be like that. So a lot of different things, and then you think about the fonts and speed. The fonts in Japan or non-Roman characters fonts actually have a different ways of rendering as well, and so you have to think about which one to choose, which fonts to choose for the speed as well. So small things like that does matter. The third level is experience enhancement. So this is the one is a bit more complicated now because it actually, you have the basic, get it right, good experience, but this one is actually the one that is going to help you to stand out in the market, like from your competitor, and actually give your users, local users, exactly what they need. But it's also involved more work and thinking to do that. Let's start with something everyone is familiar with and can relate to. So, know this Pixar movie? Yeah, Inside Out, yeah. So this is Riley and this is Riley Dad. So this is one of the scenes in most of the countries that we can see, and this is the other scenes that you can find in Japan. See the difference very quickly? Yeah, the vegetables. So in Pixar did some research and everything, they found out actually, unlike other countries, actually, Japanese kids actually really like broccoli. It's not disgusting to them. So they're trying to find things that actually kids didn't like, a vegetable they didn't like, turned out to be green pepper. So they changed the scene to be relevant. This is not just one scene. They also have different scenes. So some of us see ice hockey in the dad's daydreamings, and then some countries actually see soccer or football. Actually, in fact, Pixar was saying that they actually have a total of 28 changes on different shots just to cover all the localizations in different countries. And the other example is like the things that you can provide them in the content. So like, for example, when we kind of work with British Medical Journal, we kind of show the publications to European users or readers. And the things they ask about is, okay, what is this, what is the reference for these articles and publications, and where can I find these links and so on. But when we show it to Japanese, and the questions is different now. They are asking about, so what does my peers think about them? Like who else in my peers are actually using these articles? because they are more collectivist society. They care more about what other people think. So the content that you're showing them, or the other features that you're showing them, has to be adapted very differently as well. So another example of how cultural nuances can influence and people's mindset and your behaviors of your customers and on your commercial and product development. So you might think that some of your products are actually not seasonal. Everyone is using it all the time. But sometimes actually, in some countries, a certain time, actually people will use it a bit more than the others. So for example, I was catching up with a friend to talk about international growth about a while back, and we're talking about how one of the popular video streaming services or company tends to increase their monthly subscriptions during October or November time. And that is actually not a coincidence. That is because they know that it's actually closest to our Christmas. And Christmas, people tend to have the intention of saying, I will have time to binge watch TV series or movies with my friends or alone. So even though the increase of the cost kind of showing to them, they were saying, like, it's fine, I'm going to watch it. So it's kind of decreased the cancellations rate. And we see the similar pattern in gaming as well, because people tend to have more time to play games in the winter seasons. And when I was working with an audiobook company, Storytel from Sweden, it's the same. We wanted to understand, look into ways to increase their retentions and subscriptions for their Saudi Arabian users. And one of the things we also observe is that during Ramadan, fasting month, people tend to cancel because they want to spend more time praying and read Quran. Or when kids actually go to school, parents, moms, especially in that countries, will tend to be too busy, so don't have time to listen to audiobooks. Or students in university have exams and they will kind of not ready. So at that point, they're actually more likely to cancel their subscriptions as well. And when I work with Spotify as well, we see similar thing as well. So those who have low willingness to pay, like people who are happy to use free service with limitations, they tend to see the need to subscribe during summer period, because summer they will have more time to listen to music, so they want the experience without ads. And also summer means they are traveling, so they want to be able to listen to music without internet connection, so offline playing. So all these two are actually premium features for Spotify. So we see people tend to actually more inclined to want to pay, even though they are a bit more cheapskate, not want to pay for anything normally. So what does that mean to the business then? So for example, if you want to increase your prices and look into increase your cost for products or service, you might want to look into the right time and think about when is actually the right time to give them to have a campaigns or offers, like in summer for Spotify, for example. And for this audiobook company, what they could do is actually have a pause subscriptions for that month features, so that once after the month's gone, it will automatically come back again to resume. So because once you lost them to cancel, it's really hard for them to get back to subscribe again. But when you pause it and automatically come back, oh, it's there, they will continue to use that as well. So there's all these little things that you can think about that will affect how your product's being developed and kind of shown to the users. And to make a service complete as well, you have to think about not just how people behave and what they need and so on, right? Typical user UX and user research, but also the whole digital system as well. So there are a lot of companies actually trying, digital health company trying to kind of find solutions for medical solutions for sub-Saharan countries, sub-Saharan Africa countries, but not successful. I was working with Babylon Health, and on the behalf, I think they got the Gates Foundations, money from Gates Foundations, and they wanted to see how actually could use digital services to increase medical adherence for TB, HIV, and also mental health users. So we actually went out and talked to people and talked to the clinicians and hospital and so on, as well as the patients. And one thing we found is that actually a lot of, because of the whole, that how they see HIV in that community or that country, a lot of people actually didn't tell their partners or wife or family or parents that they have HIV, despite they are taking medications and to keep them going. And so they don't actually want clinics or hospitals to give them calls, to actually text them. They prefer calls. Because when you text, the partners might accidentally see the text and start asking questions. But with calls, they can not pick it up when it's at the not right time, or they can pick it up and pretend they are talking to someone else. And most of the time, the nurses and everything actually knows that is the case. So they will just say, we'll call you later or come to us and so on. So all this is really important to keep people kind of using it and kind of trust your products and help your service to continue using them as well. And the other thing, the other point that I was making is that when you look at your products and services, when you go into a country, trying to understand the cultural differences, it might be different from what the other company with another industry actually look into. So for example, when I was working with Asana for their Japan company, when they're about to launch, to look into all these marketing fit and propositions and pricing package and resources allocations. We went in and we actually kind of think about what are the things that are important for us to look into. So like, for example, in Japan, hierarchy, they are pretty hierarchical. So what does that mean to Asana as a kind of work management tool? How should you position yourself? How should you design your features? And also actually assigning tasks to your colleagues without telling them, but just assigning them online is very rude and inconsiderate, because you might put the other person in a very odd positions because they might not have the capacity to do it or the skills or knowledge to do it. So you just make it very hard for them to come. So in Asana, it's actually one of the key features, assigning tasks, especially when we were doing the research. So how should they actually change or adapt the features so that it actually works within the culture in Japan? But on the same trip, I was working with Spotify as well. But in Spotify, we don't look at hierarchical. We don't look at how people assign job tasks and so on. Instead, we look into how actually people still have the big love and strong love on the physical products of the CDs. Because like this is, it's called, what is it called? Tower Records. It have four levels. A lot of you might have seen it. There are a lot of levels in all CDs, and you can listen and buy. And it's actually also legal, and it's okay to kind of rent CDs from shops, Tower Records, or actually in library for €2.50. I don't know, price might have gone up. And it's fine for them to do that. So instead of looking into hierarchical and so on, that we look into like the love, all these kind of behaviors, like why people have this love of wanting to own something, and also how can we convert the physical experience into digital experience as well. So these are the things that we can actually look into transforming the business. So all these small insights, I've just give examples here and there. They seem small, but actually when you accumulate them, they could actually be very powerful because they actually give you a better sense and holistic view of the countries and the markets. So I created this during pandemic because we can't go and see the world. Let me bring the world to you. kind of. So it was actually supposed to be short 1,400 characters because at that time still have limit for that. So each of the countries that kind of write it down to kind of have a few things that towards their attitudes and also culture elements that you can think about. So let's talk the Philippines as an example. So in the Philippines, they have this culture called ayam malugi, which is I don't want to feel cheated. What does that mean? So the tingy culture that they have means they can buy things in a small volumes. So you can buy garlics in cloves. You can buy cigarettes in sticks. You can buy oil in cups, or you can buy shampoo in sachet. So, and you can buy in sari store, which is like a store on the roadside anywhere you can find. So even now, this behavior is because of the financial in the years in past years. But then a lot of wealthy consumers in the Philippines are still doing this behavior. It's just they buy more sachets. That is because they're already very adapted to that behavior. It's not because they can't afford anymore, but it's just something they're familiar with. So what does that mean using this insight? What does that mean to your business? So it could mean that if you are subscriptions products like Spotify, you could actually provide them with a subscriptions that cheaper so that they can pay for what they only need, or actually like creating something called mini plan like Spotify had done, that you can subscribe for day and daily or weekly. So you just pay for what you want. You are not being cheated, so pay for what you want. So this actually we roll out to another 7 countries as well. So talking about the Kenya and Rwanda trips as well, one other learning that we actually got for myself as well is that sometimes as much as you can get from the users, you need to also understand where all these are coming from. So for example, they have these support groups for HIV patients, and it's very important for them to go because that is very good in keeping them together and be positive as well. But a lot of people say, oh, I don't go anymore because we have to give money. But it's not a fees. It's not compulsory, but you feel like you have to pay. But the money is actually being collected so that they can give it to someone who actually needs money very much within the group, or they can use it to buy like tools for projects together, like sewing projects, and they can buy materials on. But because of this, a lot of people don't tend to go anymore because they don't have money. So we know their behaviors and so on, but they couldn't tell us, or we couldn't hear why they need this money, like where does that come from? So it's not until I came back and then I look into it further, is because of this Harambee culture. So this is actually started when they first independent, and their first president actually created this Harambee culture so that not everything not just rely on the government to bring the country up back again, but also everyone have the responsibility to support each other. So this become a culture to them. But these are not the things that the users, actually the patients know. They say, oh yeah, because of that, now we actually support money and give everything. So it's kind of like you need to actually have a better view and holistic view as well. So this is what I often say is a holistic view in global growth. So the thing I touch on a lot of things on the business. So it could be like on content, sales, monetization, design, and products. Because to grow and make it properly in a business successful in the countries, is actually touch on every single point of the business. And you as a developer as well, you play even important role because you can be touching all of these aspects depending on which teams you are working on. So there are a lot of input, and you are a good advocate as well to make it right for your customers in different countries. So one of the things, like for example, is payment methods as well. Like a lot of companies didn't actually think about payment method is very important for your growth of your products as well, because you need to think about, apart from credit cards, how else people actually aware of. Like for example, these are the current payment methods that is actually popular or familiar in different countries. So you need to provide all this kind of payment infrastructure and solution for them. And they will keep changing as well. Like for example, apart from M-Pesa, who actually from decades, from 2007, a lot of others are actually very, very new in the last few years as well, like Pix. Only the last few years they started to be popular and everyone's. So this is a photo I took when we went downtown Sao Paulo. Like the homeless actually say, please use Pix to actually give me money. So they are using Pix to ask for money as well. So I talk a lot and trying to touch on different points. So this is just kind of summary of what we talked about earlier. So yeah, I know each time I give a talk, people say, oh, can you give a reference on where you can find all these insights? I'll just like, no, because it's not easy. For example, I was talking about earlier, to create one guide for that cover everything about one country is definitely impossible. So yeah, there's no if there's no magic wand that actually would can help us to kind of just get it right in this market, do this, and it will be right, because it's also dependent on the industry. But that is also what makes it very interesting as well and exciting for when you start designing for your different markets and so on. So yeah, culturalization, kind of trying to embed that in within your team as much as possible. I know Bob Iger was talking about go there, and it's not all everyone would like to go, but it's just not the luxury. But at least kind of having that kind of mentality of we need to care about what our users want in locally, and it's more than just language. That is actually a good start on that as well. So yeah, and also understanding them and designing for them is not one-off things. So it's always continuously. So don't stop once you've done one localization or culturalization effort. Just keep continuing that. So yeah, that's me. Thank you.